Well, hello there, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, and I'm back with another video. And today's video, I'm going to be talking about villains and the importance of having a good villain in your campaign, and trying to highlight in this series some villains that are present in the Shadow of the Demon Lord, uh, not the game system, but the campaign world that is kind of baked into the system, and because try to pull them out of the shadows where they're hiding right now and just kind of, make them known so that you can, use them. Because there's actually a lot of cool villains that are featured, or a lot of cool potential villains that are featured in this game, but they're really kind of hidden in the lore. And one thing that I've learned out of my many years of role playing is that your game is only as good as your villain. That's true pretty much in all media. Star Wars wouldn't nearly be as fun if Darth Vader hadn't been in the first episode. Um, the Hans Gruber and Die Hard, he was a perfect villain for that movie. So you got to have a good villain in order to have something for your heroes to strive against and to try to overcome. So Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of iconic villains that are pretty well known. Many of them are on the shelf right behind me here, iconized, easy for you to say, iconized in miniature form. And unfortunately, Shadow of the Demon Lord doesn't have miniature lines, much to my chagrin. But if they did, what would they make miniatures of? And of course, they would make miniatures of all the cool monsters, but they would also need to make miniatures of the iconic villains. And so that's what this video is kind of starting a series, a mini series, I guess you could say, of me just kind of focusing on different villains in the campaign world. So that's the topic of today's video. However, I will first, what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit about some news in the Shadow of the Demon Lord world. And the first thing I'd like to bring up is the new product that is on the DM's Guild. No, I'm sorry, not the DM's Guild, but Drive Through RPG. And that is, I'll show you here in a minute, Drive Through RPG. And that is a product called the Layer of Eggs. Now, this is a product that just went on sale yesterday or the day before. Actually, I think yesterday. And of course, it's in the Schwab entertainment section of Drive Through RPG. But this is the second in a series of products that Rob Schwab is creating based on the work of artists that he has or is working with for Shadow of the Demon Lord. This particular product, he asked one of his favorite artists, or one of the artists that he works with, to create a monster, and then he would create the mechanics for the monster and put some lore behind it. So the artwork for this one, and the the artist is Kim Van Deun. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but she's the one that came up with the monster. And for this monster, it's not showing it in the preview. It's pretty gruesome. And when you read through the monster's abilities, even more gruesome. So Robert Schwab, kind of put up a little bit of a backstory for possible ways this monster could have been created or come to be, where it could be located, that sort of thing. And I just bought it yesterday. I'm already going to put it into one of my campaigns. Now, as you know, if you follow my videos, as you know, I just started a campaign for Dreams of the Dreams of the Dead God, and I'm only on the fourth. I think I've had 3 or 4 sessions so far. The characters are only second level, but as life would have it, one of my players has work commitments for the next couple of weeks, so I'm not able to, or I'm not willing to continue that campaign. Because I only have 4 players to begin with, and if I lose one, that brings me down to 3. They're in the middle of an adventure, so I really don't want to continue that adventure until that player is available again. So, bit of a conundrum. What I decided to do is set up a side campaign. And the side campaign is going to be just kind of a campaign that I will go to whenever I'm down a player or two, and it will be designed so that we can play with, as few as two, one or two players, if the players are willing to play that way. So I just had this brainstorm last week when I was lamenting the fact that my friend wasn't going to be able to join for a couple more weeks, and I already had to miss last week, so it's a total of 3 weeks. So I decided to set up the side campaign, and that side campaign is going to be, I'm going to be experimenting with some stuff in the game that I haven't used before, and some ideas that I've had that I haven't implemented yet. So this campaign is going to be set in kind of it's going to be set on the border of the Desolation, and it's going to be in the frontier just north of the Crusader states, and it's going to be just outside of Westhold, actually a few days ride outside of Westhold. And so my idea for this campaign is it's going to be set in kind of a Wild Wild West genre, and it's still going to be in the same time frame as all the rest of my campaigns are, which is the current time frame with the fall of the Empire and all that's happening there. It's going to fall in line with the rest of my campaigns, but since it's going to be in such a remote part of the campaign world, it's going to have its own genre, and that's going to be the Wild Wild West meets steampunk meets Victorian England meets Universal Monsters. Mashing all those things up together into a fun little weird campaign. And whenever I'm missing a player or maybe even 2 players, then I will go from my main campaign over to the side campaign and come up with some weird gonzo adventure for that campaign. So why I went into that segue or into that digression is because one idea I got for an adventure is this Layer of Eggs adventure that I just bought yesterday. And this is primed already with the background that Schwab gave. It's primed to be used as a monster in a mine. And as fate would have it, there's going to be a mine featured in my side campaign. So, anyway, just all that to say is I'm going to use this adventure or use this monster already in my new side campaign. Probably next week, because I've already got tonight's session lined out, and it's going to be based off of the starter adventure, Dark Deeds in that one place. But I'm changing it up somewhat so it'll fit into my Wild West theme. But anyway, that's tonight's adventure, and then next week will be the adventure featuring this monster. So it should be pretty crazy, and I look forward to that. So anyway, I wanted to shout out for this product because it just went online yesterday, and I think the monster is pretty innovative and pretty creepy. In fact, I'll probably be drawing the monster as a token for my next token set. I haven't started on a new token set. I've been working on this. I've been working on an adventure for Roll20. Because I've got 5 token sets out there right now, and I really wanted to do something other than another token set for my next thing. And I thought, well, there's not really a whole lot of adventures for Shadow of the Demon Lord. I think there are like 3 or 4, and they're all, fairly established adventures that have been around, probably since the Kickstarter. So I thought I would throw something new out there that people could use and would be, featured for Shadow of the Demon Lord. So I've actually been working on that for the better part of a year. I had no idea how much work goes into creating an adventure for a virtual table. Well, creating an adventure, period, but creating an adventure for a virtual tabletop is that much more difficult because you got to create all the maps, you got to create all the artwork, you got to format the whole thing. And so, I'm still working on all that stuff. And then I have to play test it. So I'm still looking for a time and a place where I can play test that game. And it's going to be for expert tier adventurers. So, and I also have to create, pre-gen adventurers so that people can play it without having to roll up their own characters or whatever. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I've been working on it, like I said, for about a year, but I hope to get it online by summer. I'm going to set that deadline for myself, and I hope to be able to get that in place. But anyway, as far as the layer of eggs, I'm going to try to create a token for the layer of eggs for my game, which again is going to be next week. So I'm going to be busy drawing it sometime this week, and then I'll just feature that in my next token set. So there you go. All right, so that was the bit of news that I wanted to share today. I also wanted to do a shout out. I had a new subscriber to my YouTube channel, Creative Atrophy, and he said some kind words to me about my videos, and I do appreciate when somebody goes out of the way to leave me some feedback. So Creative Atrophy, thank you very much. And he also asked, he or she also suggested that at some point I do a video on converting the Curse of Strahd into Shadow of the Demon Lord. Well, and he did that because of my last video where I mentioned the Curse of Strahd as being one of my favorite adventures that they have produced for 5th edition. So I told him I would do that. However, him or her, I told Creative Atrophy that I would do that, but I don't know when I'll be able to get to it, because in order to be able to do something that extensive, I actually have to do it. I have to convert it so that I can talk about it. And that's going to take a lot of work. So what I will do in the meantime, Creative Atrophy, is I actually have a post that I saved from the Shadow of the Demon Lord Reddit channel. And it talks about converting Shadow of the Demon Lord or converting Curse of Strahd to Shadow of the Demon Lord. And there's some links on there for different articles on how to do that. So to satisfy your question and your request initially, I'm going to provide the link to that topic in Reddit in YouTube in the comment section. And so you can go out there and check it out, and hopefully that will help you get a head start on that. But I will at some point do the conversion, because I would like to run Curse of Strahd and Shadow of the Demon Lord. I think it'd be a good fit. But I just don't see that happening anytime in the near future. So just wanted to let you know that, and throw that out there, that those links will be in the comment section. Okay, so enough with all that preamble stuff. Let's get to the main topic of today, and that is villains. All right, so villains are essential for your campaign. And, what's the biggest, baddest villain in Shadow of the Demon Lord? Well, obviously it's the Demon Lord. But you really can't run the Demon Lord, because he is the god. He is the only real god in the campaign. And so as such, he is not something that you can really fight. Or can you? Actually, I kind of have an idea of how to do that fight. For my end game, for my mega campaign. I may talk about that someday, but not today. But at any rate, he's not really a practical villain for your typical campaign. So you have to delve into the lore of the game to find other villains. And so I would say a close number 2 is the villain that Robert Schwalb himself has set up to be like the main villain of the settings lore, and that is the Witch King. Why do I always draw a blank when these things come up? The Witch King Ashrakal. There you go, Ashrakal. So he is featured briefly in the core rulebook, and he's mentioned also throughout a number of supplements. But the supplement that really goes into a lot of detail is the Men of Gog supplement. Now, the Men of Gog supplement, I already had a whole video on the Men of Gog supplement, which I'm not going to repeat here because that would be redundant. But what I am going to do is just kind of focus in on the Witch King and talk about why he would be a good villain. So here is the only image that I'm familiar with in all of the artwork in Shadow of the Demon Lord that actually features the Witch King, and it's a pretty cool image, but it's not really big. And so it's kind of hard to see what's going on here, but you definitely see the undead dragon behind him, and then you can see he's wearing black robes and he's got a crown on and he's bearing his black sword that's got the mist coming off of it. That's all featured in the lore in the Men of Gog. That's all described. Actually, I'm not really sure about the black robes, but everything else is described as you see pictured here, except for these snakes. Now, I'm not really sure what the snakes are all about. I know snakes are featured heavily in the Witch King's background. They talk about it, but I'm not really sure why he's got snakes wrapped around him. That just might be an aesthetic thing for this picture, because when he dies, when the Witch King is killed by the first emperor, his body just breaks into a bunch of serpents, and they all slither off into the dark corners of the world. And so that might be just a call out to how the Witch King, died essentially, or escaped death. And anyway, that's what's pictured here is a bunch of snakes wrapped around his arm. Not how I envision him based on the description in the Men of Gog, but that's okay, because everybody you kind of come up with your own picture in your head. It always helps to have an illustration to kind of guide you, but I actually envisioned the Witch King to be less Witch King of Angmar and more of a man of Gog. And so I actually did do a Witch King token for one of my token sets. I forget which one. But I didn't draw him looking like this. I drew him looking, and of course it's a top-down view, so you don't get the whole body shot. But I drew him more looking like an Egyptian pharaoh, shirtless, most of his skin bared, wearing gold, carrying the black sword and his staff. And he has a staff mentioned in his lore here that's not pictured. And so these are the things that I included in my token. But this is a very valid representation as well. I mean, he could be the Egyptian pharaoh type under these robes. He just, maybe it was a cold night that night. Who knows? Maybe he didn't want to be nipping out or something. But at any rate, he's got the robes on this fine cold evening. And but at any other time, you would see him in the desert, with his chest bared. He's got the pecs and he's got the six pack going. And so yeah. Anyway, both representations, I'm going to say, are equally valid. So at any rate, why should this guy be your main villain? Well, I will tell you that a villain needs to be scary, needs to be powerful, and it needs to represent a significant threat to either the player characters directly, something the player characters care about, or something that impacts a large number of people, such as their community, their kingdom, or their world. And the Witch King is a world-threatening villain. He's not the kind of guy that marches in and takes over this hamlet and is satisfied with being, Mayor Witch King of the Hobbiton. Now he's much more of a Thanos type. He is take over the world and then see where we can go from there. And so if you read the lore of the Men of Gog, the Men of Gog have this real hatred for the old gods, because they know what the old gods are. They're not really gods. The old gods are powerful beings that came into being because of the worship of mortals. And so these old gods remain in power because they put into place a system that keeps the mortals in check. Mortals are the only ones that have the ability to reincarnate. Their souls, once they die from their body, they go back out into the universe and are reborn. Now, the problem with that for the immortals is that if they were to be able to retain their life experiences from lifetime to lifetime, then they would become, over time, they would become vastly more powerful than the Fae, who are immortal, but they only have one lifetime. Once an immortal dies, they're dead. There is no reincarnating. So they saw the potential threat that these mortals had with their ability to reincarnate. So they put into place the whole cycle of life system, which forces a mortal soul to be sucked into the underworld, to be, or hell, to be cleansed of all of their sins and corruption, and to spend enough time down there so that they forget their previous lifetime and can be reborn into the mortal world, essentially a clean slate, and which takes time, right? So the men of Gog knew this. They realized this. They discovered this, and they hate the old gods for the power that they have over mortals. And so the men of Gog, with the Witch King being a big proponent of this, but really it started with his father. And his father is named here. His father was one of the original men of Gog. And his father, his name was Amaral. Right there. So Amaral was the first king of the men of Gog, and he was the one that developed and created the first undead. And this was his attempt at trying to overthrow the monopoly that the old gods have on the cycle of life, and to really to cheat them of the souls of the men of Gog. It didn't work out the way he wanted it to. The first undead, were kind of stupid, mindless drones. It wasn't until much later until he discovered the way to preserve his spirit in an undead shell, or the spirit of a mortal within an undead shell, thus creating higher forms of undead. But at first, the undead that that was created were like your zombies and your animated corpses and those mindless undead. And so Amaral, and of course later on the kings that would follow, culminating with Ashrakal, all continued on that work to develop the necromancy and also the forbidden arts, and the dark the dark philosophies, the dark traditions of magic. These were all developed, or at least they had their start in the civilization of the men of Gog. So the Witch King is a direct descendant of Amaral. And there was a legend that Amaral would be reborn at some point, despite the whole, cycle of life. It was thought that his will would be so powerful that he would be able to retain it and force himself into being reborn into the world. And so when, throughout the course of history for the men of Gog, there was always these people claiming to be the second coming of Amaral, but they always turned out to be false, false reincarnations. Until Ashrakal showed up. And Ashrakal, at a very early age, showed his um, disposition for um, mastering the forbidden arts, and so he became a very powerful arcanist very early in his age, but he himself was not satisfied with that. So to prove to himself and to his people that he was actually the second coming of Amaral, he went into the desert on a vision quest of sorts, to prove that he was who he thought he was. And so he was gone. I forget what I think it says 9 months or 8 months, or he was gone for, maybe even been years. I'm not really sure. I can't remember, but he was gone for a long time. And when he returned, he wielded power that no other mortal or immortal has wielded up to that point. And with that power, he formed the armies of the men of Gog, and he marched them south into the lands of the empire of the Adine, who were in power at that time, and basically took the place over pretty easily. So this guy, Ashrakal, the Witch King, he is a badass, and he is kind of a almost an endgame villain himself. However, he is still defeatable, as was illustrated by the fact that when the Calasians invaded, the first emperor of the Calasians, who bore a significant amount of power himself, and was a mighty warrior, he was able to best Ashrakal in combat. Now, granted, Ashrakal had been weakened because of his failure in Balgrendia. Now, I have another video that talks about Balgrendia, and I think the Men of Gog. I talked about what happened with the Witch King there, but just a long story short, Witch King tried to conquer Balgrendia, but the fairy queen that resided there decided that she would rather destroy her realm than to let Ashrakal rule it. So she basically nuked it by turning her realm inside out, and this resulted in the unleashing of an unimaginable amount of power that leveled a sizable chunk of Balgrendia, warped another sizable chunk, killed most of the Witch King's forces that he had taken with him, and gravely wounded the Witch King himself. So this event weakened the Witch King and left him vulnerable for the incredibly bad timing of the Calasians' invasion. And so that, in my estimation, that's what enabled the emperor, and I forget his name. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It's a cool name. But anyway, it enabled that emperor to best the Witch King in one-on-one combat. So the Witch King can be defeated, but in the height of his power, I would say it would be super tough for him to be defeated. So in my mind, I'm envisioning a villain that is probably a difficulty of 1000, on par with a demon prince. But I could be convinced that maybe he might not be that high, maybe 750 difficulty. But in my game, he's going to be 1000. So this guy is dead because he was killed by the emperor, according to the lore. But when the emperor struck him down, his body morphed into a bunch of serpents that slithered off into the crowds, the surrounding crowds, and into the ground, and they just disappeared. And so he hasn't been seen since, and he hasn't been heard from since. And this has been almost 1000 years since this occurred. So the prevailing wisdom is that the Witch King was killed that day. But there is a loophole there. There is an out. And that is that these serpents each carried off a part of his essence, not unlike how the Dark Lord from Harry Potter split his soul into the different um, the different receptacles that I can't remember what they're called now, but he was able to be reincarnated into a new body because his soul, or most of his soul, was still out there, um, and yet he wasn't his full power when he came back, and he was trying to regain the power that he had when he returned. Um, and I may be misremembering the whole Harry Potter thing. It has been a while since I've seen it, but at any rate, it's easy to find a comparison between the Witch King and the Dark Lord of the Harry Potter series, because there can be some similarities there, not withstanding the robe. But at any rate, I would say, if the Dark Lord from the Harry Potter series would take off the robes, he'd be a wuss compared to Ashrakal. So at any rate, the snakes carried off bits of his essence. And so as long as at least part of his soul remains on Earth, there's a chance that he can be brought back. And so that is the stuff of either one campaign or a series of campaigns that culminates in the return of the Witch King. Now, my hesitation in creating an adventure featuring the return of the Witch King is that Robert Schwalb himself has said, and he actually had a Kickstarter in which one of the stretch goals would be to write the campaign in which the Witch King returns. Unfortunately, that Kickstarter didn't hit that goal, and so that campaign was never written. But Schwalb himself has said in other places that he does still hope to, at some point, write that campaign. The only problem is that the man is busier than God, and he's working on his new game, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. He just put out the apocalyptic game. He's still putting out stuff for Shadow of the Demon Lord. Every once in a while, he puts out stuff for D&D. And so when the man is going to have time to do this, I have no idea. So I can't count on that. So built into my campaign world outline that I think I showed you guys before, but it didn't hurt to show you again. Built into that is the mega campaign that I have set up for myself. And at some point in that mega campaign, I'm actually going to feature the Return of the Witch King. Now, put it out far enough so that it gives me hope that Schwalb will actually write the adventure so I don't have to. And I have it right here, Revenge of the Witch King. Yeah, I've got, right now I'm on Dreams of the Dead God, and I'm also at the same time going to be writing Tales of the Desolation. But, I've got several kind of thought out before Revenge of the Witch King. So this will be a while. This will be at least a couple of years, if not longer, before I can get to even thinking about bringing the Witch King back. So hopefully that gives him time to present this. Maybe that will be another stretch goal in his Weird Wizard campaign. Maybe. Schwalb, you hear me? Are you listening to me? He didn't watch this. I wish he'd watch this. That'd be great, but yeah, he's too busy for that. Anyway, he's got too much to do right now. So maybe it'll be a stretch goal for his Weird Wizard. That would be awesome. But if not, we'll probably have to wait a while, and this buys me some time. So anyway, the Ashrakal the Witch King is, in my estimation, probably one of the best villains that you can foreshadow for a long time before actually bringing him into your mega campaign, if you decide to do a mega campaign as well. Which I should do a video on mega campaigns because I think they're cool. I think the carrying on of campaigns from one to another to chronicle the demise of a Shadow of the Demon Lord world is a cool concept I have not heard other people talk about. So note to self, hey Siri, Make a video about what I just said. Mega campaigns. Yeah. All right, shut up. Okay, so there you go. So what can Ashrakal do? Well, this is kind of hinted at in the lore that is in the Men of Gog, but he's clearly a very powerful arcanist, meaning that he has a lot of arcane power and is the master of many traditions. In fact, I would go as far as to say, in my campaign world, he will be a master of all traditions. And on top of that, he will have knowledge of magic that has been lost to the world. So he will have access to all the spells of rank 6 through 10 that currently are not available to normal arcanists, normal characters that become spellcasters. Because the highest power that you can attain is the power of 5. And you reach that when you get to either 9th or 10th level, I forget. And, if you use the Paragon paths that is featured in the Forbidden Rules, then you can grow in power beyond the rank of, or the power of 5. But if you're just playing up to 10th level, then it caps out at power 5. To cast rank 6 through 10 spells, you need a power of 6 or above. And Ashrakal, in my estimation, he's got a power of 10. So he would be able to cast any spell that has ever existed, which is pretty cool. Now, the problem is that most of the spells that are 6 or above aren't spells that you can just kind of flick your wrist and make them happen. They're more ritualistic type spells that take some effort to set up, to make happen. Or at least I think. I haven't read through all of occult philosophy as of yet. Where did I put that thing? Oh, it's upstairs. I haven't read them all, but from the looks of them, they look to appear kind of ritualistic type of spells. But I could be totally wrong on that. So I'm going to have to go back and read that, and I will swallow my words if I am proven wrong. But at any rate, even though he can cast spells of rank 6 through 10, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best spells to cast when you encounter a team of adventurers. So I'll have to read through those and see, what would be the type of spells that Ashrakal would be able to cast. Then I would have to determine what limitations I would put on Ashrakal himself. Even though he is pretty powerful, he does need limitations. Otherwise, he'd be a god. So he would have a stat block that would be equivalent to that of a demon lord, but a good chunk of that would be his spell list and probably his favorite spells and kind of his go-to spells and what he uses in actual combat situations. So I'm going to have to, whenever I sit down to write my Revenge of the Witch King campaign, I'm going to have to put some thought into how I'm going to actually develop Ashrakal. But he would have, like I said, access to every spell that's ever been developed. He would have his black sword, which I don't think the lore talks about what his sword does, other than it is powerful. It may give an idea of the main power of his sword. See if I can find it here. Let's see. Witch King crowned. Let's see. I think he is bearing his sword when he came back from the desert. Okay, here's some cool lore. When he came back, his hair had gone white. Barely visible black markings had formed just under his skin. His eyes became solid pools of darkness that drank in the light rather than reflect it. His voice was altered. Whenever he spoke, faint voices echoed him, coming from deep within his body. And this was all after he came back from his exile in the desert. And I'm pretty sure that it said something about him carrying the black sword with him as well. But I don't see it in that section. And I'm not going to waste time here looking for it, but I know it's in the lore in here somewhere. It does mention his black sword. Now, what that sword does, I'm not exactly sure, but that would be if I had to stat him up, his sword would be a very powerful relic. That would be on par with something like the Wand of Orcus, or the Sword Stormbringer from the Michael Moorcock series, which actually kind of looks like it. Which the D&D version of that is, I think, Black Razor. So I could probably look at Black Razor and see how that is statted out to maybe reskin it for Ashrakal sword. And then he also has a powerful staff, which would be, I would presume it would be something similar to like the Staff of the Magi. And that's featured in D&D. So at any rate, his robes would probably be something. His crown would probably be something. This guy would be a walking army in and of himself. And then, of course, he has his undead dragon that he rides into battle. So, the characters would have to be pretty buffed up, 10th level characters to be able to take on Ashrakal and have a chance, have a hope in being able to defeat him, because he's got a lot of tools available to him. He would have epic resistance. He would have epic abilities that give him more turns per round. He would definitely be on par, like I said, with a Demon Prince. And so at any rate, just to kind of wrap this up, because I think I'm just kind of rambling and repeating myself now, the Witch King Ashrakal is probably the best villain that you can come up with for Shadow the Demon Lord. But it's somebody that deserves a long, slow build-up, lots of foreshadowing, and that would make his reveal a special event for your group. And that would put the fear of what this guy actually represents into your group. So that's what I would recommend if you ever plan on using Ashrakal the Witch King as one of your villains. Okay, so that is it for now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I will be doing this villain series periodically. It's not going to be every episode. It's just going to be whenever I have time to research another villain and to have enough information about them to actually to talk about. But I have a whole list of the villains that I found, which include not only singular villains like Ashrakal, but there are also villainous groups, cults, and organizations, such as the Brotherhood of Shadows, the Sisters of the Blue Hand, and so forth. There are also things that you can import into your Shadow of the Demon Lord game that exist in other mediums. So, for example, you could take Orcus from Dungeons and Dragons and drag him kicking and screaming into your Shadow of the Demon Lord game if you want to. I personally don't want to do that, simply because I think Orcus is a D&D thing. Demogorgon is a D&D thing. Strahd is a D&D thing. All those icons in D&D are D&D icons. So my personal belief is that they should stay in D&D. But if you're never going to play D&D, steal them. Shit, why not? I mean, who's going to know? Use them as your bad guys for your Shadow of the Demon Lord game. They already have the lore, so you don't have to create anything. You just need to fit it into your game world, and you're off and running. Plus, you have the benefit of your players probably having heard of them. Who hasn't heard of Orcus? Who hasn't heard of Count Strahd? These are all very well-known icons, and the whole point of an icon, being an icon, is that a lot of people know about them, and therefore a lot of people fear them. And so that is that's one benefit that D&D has that you can steal from if you never plan on playing D&D, or if your players don't play D&D. But for me, I still play D&D with my Saturday group, so I want to keep D&D separate, and so those guys are going to remain in D&D. However, I can steal shamelessly from other things, such as Cthulhu, and I'm stealing shamelessly from Cthulhu for my current Dreams of the Dead God adventure. You can steal from comic books. You could have a Galactus type of world-ending being appear as one of your shadows. There's a book that I talk about in one of my other videos called Elder Evils that is a D&D book, but these aren't quite as iconic. These are villains that have been created to enable you to create an iconic villain out of them, but they're not really featured in the normal lore of Dungeons and Dragons. So you could take that Elder Evils book and use any one of them or all of them as great villains for your Shadow the Demon Lord campaign. So at any rate, I'm going to talk about more of this stuff in future videos. I got to leave myself something to talk about in these sessions. So for now, I think I've bent your ear long enough. Once again, thank you for watching my videos, and I do encourage you to leave me some feedback or any suggestions on any video discussions you want to have or you want me to discuss on this video in the future. Just like Creative Atrophy did. And so once again, thanks everybody who takes the time to watch my videos, and I look forward to making more. So with that, I give a hearty hail out to our Demon Lord Robert Schwab for creating the game, and to the rest of you, just normal hail.